All right, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. This is a update on a little project I'm working on, just an experiment that I'm doing with myself. I like to test everything, so I've tried many different supplements. You see all the quick fixes. I've been around a while. Had a personal development interest for decades. You can imagine that I've probably seen a lot of different quick fixes, elixirs, and snake oil, and so anyway, I test everything and at least get a point of view. And I think the more I've tested, the easier it becomes to test because you can isolate. Anyway, what I'm doing is a little experiment because it's this, the neurotransmitter, generating neurotransmitter is strongly correlated with improving other health markers: testosterone, dopamine, serotonin, acetylcholine, which is the signal from the neural pathway to the muscle junction, and glutamate, which is the signal from the central nervous system to the neural pathway. So that chain, the signal from the CNS, the neural pathway itself, and the muscle junction, that's super important if we want to have any kind of activity. Now, what I've known before is that sprinting has many health benefits. So for example, brain-derived neurotropic factor. You can look it up as BDNF, brain-derived neurotropic factor. This actually is building the neural pathways, is strengthening the neurons, our network of neurons. We have 100 billion neurons. The health of those neurons has a lot to do with our overall health. AMPK, that's the metabolism. Think of it as energy modulation. Mitochondria, think of mitochondria as organs within the cell. So you have a cell, and then the mitochondria is the organs within the organ within the cell. So the health of the mitochondria has a lot to do with how the cells are operating. The cells are the foundation. Sprinting benefits all of that. I already said testosterone for men, estrogen for women after menopause. There's even the telomeres on the DNA. So think of these as caps. If you think about here with split ends, that's the way I look at it. DNA, the strands at the end, as we age, the caps at the end that keep the DNA from fraying, they get shorter. And as they get shorter, there's more fraying. So there's a direct correlation between the shortening of the telomeres and aging. Now, sprinting even helps that. So when you look at it, it's like, why wouldn't I do that? Now, for a long time, I've wanted to get the placebo effect on demand, and I know some of the supplements work because of the placebo effect. And if you've tried different supplements, you may notice that they work for a while and then they stop. The body's always trying to get to normalization. So the body is going to get to the blood pH of 7.35, 7.45. Yeah, it doesn't matter really what you eat. It's going to get to that level. When we introduce a supplement, this is the way I look at it. When we introduce something new, the body's going to adjust. Think of this as plateaus. As if you're a bodybuilder, you've done any exercising, weightlifting, we hit these plateaus. Think of it as the plateau. So the supplement works for a while. Again, this is not scientific, but it's the way I've made sense of it. It works for a while, but because the body's always trying to get to status quo, and that's a big part of today's topic, then it adjusts and the supplement's no longer working. What does that have to do with this update? When I looked at sprinting, and then I came across some connections, again, always looking for the placebo effect on demand. I wanted to control the placebo effect. I didn't want it to be dependent on beliefs or anything like that. And when I came across this connection between what I'll call the 7 factors that drive neurotransmitter production, footwork drills have a huge role in that. They hit all the factors. So those factors are, and I'll repeat this a few times: novelty, something new. And if you think about martial arts, you're always progressing. It's a new belt, new katas or new forms or new exercises, new kicks, new strikes, new holds, whatever, new throws. And that's always going up. You can think judo, jiu-jitsu, karate, aikido, doesn't matter what you're thinking about, but it's just very, very similar. Yoga is very similar. Then we have intention, and they talk about that a lot in yoga, putting your attention on it, breathing. Same thing with martial arts, is striking, it's very much attention. And then the next one is precision, and very big in martial arts. The hand here versus here, it's a big difference. And with striking, starting from a certain place or not, is a big difference. And they're looking at that when they're doing the forms. And then the next one is balance. And yoga, you'll definitely see balance. In martial arts, if you're kicking, obviously you're going to have balance in order to kick. So that's there. Progression, that's the process of continuing, like I said, novelty, but progression is that we're always getting harder. We're making complex kicks, combinations. And then you have the next one would be explosiveness. So definitely there's moves, especially in the harder arts, the Japanese Shotokan, Taekwondo, that's Korean, but certainly in the striking arts, there's more explosiveness. But even in Aikido and Hapkido, these things have speed. They use speed, and so there's still explosiveness that has to do with speed. And then the last one, and this is the big one, this is the one that's, if you forget all of them, I would say, remember struggle at the edge of ability, because struggle at the edge of ability is what tells the central nervous system to get ready because more demand is coming. So the central nervous system has sort of a predictive factor going on, and it looks at what's coming based on what is. And this is why when you're sedentary, you just start basically aging, because the demands are getting less and less and less, so it predicts onto this trend line. The same way, I think the way I look at it is hunter-gatherer, right? It's the hunter-gatherer times. Hunter-gatherers, and in order to survive, you've got to be able to continue to thrive. And the central nervous system works the same way in reverse, in that it's looking forward to see what kind of demand is coming, and if that demand is increasing, it adds more. And that's the key to this. So what I put all that together and said, well, because I've had experiences between ranger school and martial arts and motorcycle racing and marathons and all that. I've seen enough examples of what worked and what didn't work for me. I can't speak for the world. I'm not in the fitness industry. That's not it at all. Well, my framework is 7 fitness areas, and I use the 7 fitness areas to help people who are over 50 get fit in all the important areas, so that they could have a healthy, fulfilling life from 50 to 100, making the second half the best half. So it's the 7 fitness areas, and physical is one of them. But the bigger thing is the identity change, changing how we approach things, and that's the 7 fitness areas. But anyway, when I talk about this progress, this increasing demand, I experimented with a few different things, and I came up with a routine that I do. It takes 5 minutes, literally 5 minutes in the morning. We'll time it. We'll do it real time and time it. But first I want to explain it, because explaining it will help make the case. So first of all, I use these bands, and the bands are a very easy way to add resistance, and they're very flexible. I think you could get them for under $30 now. I would buy, if you're really serious, I'd buy 2 sets, because they do break, and they break at inconvenient times, like while you're using them. I've never been snapped by one. So you feel like, the first time before they ever broke on me, I always thought, wow, this thing if it ever breaks, it's going to snap. It doesn't. It just breaks and nothing happens, unless you're using it as weight bearing, which I don't do. So the way I would look at it is, if you can do 25 push-ups, you want to go down to something that's super simple, like 5, that you could do on a bad day of a bad week with no energy whatsoever, and there's no excuse. That it's something so easy that you wouldn't forgive yourself if you didn't do it, because it's that easy. Add 1 a day. So first, push-ups with nothing at all. And do this for a month. You test it for yourself. Push-ups with nothing at all. And then when you get to 10, it's still going to be easy for you if you could do 25. You're not even thinking about it. But add a thin band. Wrap it around your torso. Now, there's 2 ways of doing it. There's this way, over the shoulders. And for me, I don't like it, because sometimes it feels like it's going to slide off, and then that's distracting. I just put it here. True, I'm giving up some tension, but on a relative basis, it's all coming out in the wash, because I do it the same way. So then you do 5 push-ups, and then add 1, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then you go back to 5, and you go to the next higher band. And then you go back to 5, up to 10, and then you do a combination. Now for me, if I put these 2 together, it's a good step to go from red to black to the little red. But when I add the bigger orange one, this is harder than the purple. So you have to figure all that out. But again, it's 1 exercise, or doing the exercise, 5 reps, add 1 per day. So this is where we're telling the central nervous system that more demands are coming. The central nervous system is getting ready, and this is not a scientific way of explaining it, but it starts producing more neurotransmitter. Remember, the brain wants to be efficient, so it's not producing more neurotransmitter than it thinks it needs. And that's based on that predictive. But as we start adding, it starts generating more neurotransmitter because that takes energy. And the brain is looking to be efficient, right? It wants to survive another day, so it's being efficient. So what we're doing is flooding the body, that's what I call it, flooding the body with neurotransmitter, and that's why we're getting the BDNF, the telomeres, the AMPK, the testosterone, the estrogen for women after menopause, the mitochondria, and even inflammation gets reduced, in my case, right away. And I'll explain one of the areas where that inflammation can come in. And the how is what I'm talking about now. And then I'll finish up with doing some footwork examples, because that's really what this is about. But I wanted to apply something that I had discovered a few years ago with the bands. Now, I don't do this routine. I've never done the routine every day for more than 6 months. I do it for 3 months at a time, 4 or 5 months. What happens is the bands get too heavy. Initially, all you're doing is training neural pathways. We're not talking about going to failure. We're not talking about tearing down muscle. And so we don't need any recovery. What we're doing is communicating with the nervous system that more demand is coming. And through that communication, we're building neurotransmitter, but we don't need recovery because it's not the same like muscle. The recovery happens in minutes and hours, not days and weeks. But what happens is as the bands get heavier, and I'm already starting to get to that point now, as the bands get heavier, and I'll demonstrate that today, as they get heavier, then you are interacting with muscle, and then you do get the internal resistance because it's hard work, and the muscles get a little bit sore. You're gonna see that I get out of breath, and that's the beauty of this 5-minute exercise. So the first thing I'm gonna do is walk you through each of the exercises that I do. First, before anything, I like to warm up. So I'll spend a minute, maybe a minute. Now, I normally do this on the Bosu ball, but I'm not even, and I would not necessarily put this into the 5 minutes, because all I'm doing is getting myself to the point where I want to exercise. I'm just getting my blood moving, getting that going on. Once I feel good and I'm ready to exercise, what I'll do is I do this. Now, you could start with a wall squat. You could just do something like this if you don't have a ball. What the ball does is I can go up and down. You can even go up and down if you have like the corner of a door. You can still do it, but it's not as easy as with the ball. You could also use a foam roller. Use your imagination, come up with things. Now, I talked about inflammation. So when I do these, if I'm doing a normal squat, it would be to here. But if I want to go deeper, I'll go to there. Now, sometimes I'll feel a little pain in my knees, and I'll call that inflammation. And this is what I was talking about. So I'm pressing against that inflammation. So I'm going not too much to cause damage or injury, but I just want to go far enough each day adding. So this is how you can add. You can start from here. You can literally, because remember, we want to be so easy that we're not having any resistance to the exercise. And then you can go to here. And if you can't do any of that, just do this. And then the next day, go down lower. You could use a yardstick, a tape measure, and go down lower. And do that for a set time. I would do it for like a minute. And then if you have dumbbells or something, you could add weight to it, or then you could start using something where you come back up. So that's what I was talking about with the inflammation. And when I started doing I mentioned that the body's going to get the blood to that pH, that 7.35, 7.45. Whether you eat crap or eat clean, the blood is going to get there because it needs that for survival. The cells need that for survival. When you eat clean, the body has to work less. That's important because when the body's working to get the blood to that pH level, it's creating oxidative waste and it's creating inflammation. So we're putting stress on the body to be able to process the inflammation. That's why this is such an important thing. So, my audience is life expansion after 50. I'm looking at people who are 60, 70, 80 years old and how they could add years to their life. And you could say, well, why do I want to do that? I might get hurt. Like I pulled a hamstring last week, mild, because I've learned from experience that as soon as you feel that thing go, you have to pull up, because if you take another step or two sprinting, it's gone, at least in my case. But yeah, so I would take an injury once or twice a year if it meant not being frail from 90 to 100. I would take that all day long. And another thing, when you see me do the footwork drills, you'll see the balance that comes into that. And plus also in this exercising, you'll see I have to get down on the ground and get up. I do this every day. So I'm not worried about falling and having to get back up. Now that I understand the connection with the neurotransmitter, I will do this routine every day, but I'll switch it up. Once I get to the point where I'm working the muscle, I'll switch it up and go back to something else. So I'm working the neural pathways, and you'll learn to distinguish that. So the next one I do is this wheel. And most people have seen this wheel. And one of the things that'll come up too is that I am not a person who likes a lot of reps. I know some people do. Give me a few reps. I'd rather do heavy weight in 2 reps than a lighter weight in 20 reps. I know that's not for everybody, but that's the problem with the wheel. I found myself having to do 20 and 30 and 40. You can apply this to planks as well. So with the wheel, this is the normal way of using it. Now I don't always go down to the floor or the ground, but it's the roll out and then roll back. Then after I get to 10 of those, I'll go back again. I'll do 5, and I try to do 5. I do 5 push-ups, 5 rolls, and 5 of the wall squats, and then I add resistance and go to 10. So I'm staying in sync across all of them, and it just makes it simple. But the increasing one would be to pick up one knee, go down, and then come up on 2. And then the next thing I'll do is the push-ups. So the push-ups, pretty straightforward. And one of the things I try to do is have good form. So I'll do 5 and just do those with good form. And then when you add the band, that becomes your threshold. If you start losing form, then you need to stay at that level, at that band level for a while, or reduce and go down to a lower one. Then the next one I do is I take a band and I do these bent over rows and then stand up. And that's it. That is the exercise. Now, even though I'm using a very light band, I didn't use any resistance on the push-ups. I didn't use any resistance on the ball. I'm already out of breath. You can do something like this, and this is a coordination thing. And then do 5 of those, or 2 and then 2. So it's similar to doing a squat with the bent over row, and it does work your balance and your precision. And that's when so when I talk about switching it up, these are the things I can do. Another example, the little short bands. So the little short ones, you see them sometimes in yoga, sometimes in the gym. You see people will have them on their legs. You can take those and, for example, do triceps. You can take these. I can work my tricep. You can work your biceps. So there's different ways of doing this. When you think about working neural pathways to generate neurotransmitter, we can start looking at this and say, what else can I do? Take a break. While you're taking a 3 or 4 minute break, you can just do some of these exercises. You know, that a lot of these that are used with isometrics, you can do them with the bands. You can do this in your office. Depending on your environment and how comfortable you feel, you can certainly do something like that without being seen, and because we're not going to failure, and because we're not tearing down muscle, we don't need recovery. We can do this multiple times a day, and it's not something that you have resistance for because it's not hard work. So I'm not going to talk as much because I'll get going and then I will mess up the timing. So my stuff is always set up. It's always in the same place. I just pull it out and it's there ready to go. So here we go. And so I'll do 5 exercises or 5 reps. Now with this one, before I use the band, I'll use a couple of orientation reps just to get the movement. And it's also the first exercise. And you could also grab it lower. Now you'll see I don't go all the way into a low squat when I'm doing this one. It's just a little awkward. And then from there, I do the wheel. I don't use the bands on the wheel. I tried it, but there's no good ways to do it. I'll usually do an orientation and then 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 1. So on that, I was going 1 knee out, 1 knee back. And now we're going to do the push-ups. So this is real time. This is about how I go on a day that I'm feeling good. If I'm feeling a little off, because it's in the morning, I may not move as fast. Then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You could do 1 foot. So that's another way to introduce progression by picking up a foot. When I did this initial exercise or demonstration 5 weeks ago, I was using the purple band, and I said by the end of 2 months I should get to do the green and the purple. And I'm cheating a little bit, I guess. When I look at the video, I'll see how much my arms are staying bent. Because in my head, I think they're staying bent, but I'm sure they're straightening out. Now, I'm not faking. I am out of breath. Oh, and we're gonna stop. Took me 3 minutes. 3 minutes to do that. So I've got 2 minutes to spare. Here's a footwork drill that you can do in your home. So this is a drill that you could do at home. I use this as a warm-up. And when I'm doing footwork drills, I don't do this as part of the routine but I could, right? So the first part is really just, so this one is a little too close. So if I'm just warming up, I'll start at this kind of a pace. And then I'll speed up. And that's the struggle on the edge of ability. So you saw me fail. Now, just with that one fail, the body literally starts activating a new neural pathway. And the second time it was better. Again, I don't normally do that one. So the reason I put these cones here is the next step is to add some explosiveness to it. And that's one of the factors. So the explosiveness, I'm going to put my foot at the same place at the cone and skip, and we can add a few more. Now, I'm breathing hard, and that's good because 70% of the body's toxins are released with breathing. Toxins and inflammation kind of go together. The more toxicity, the more inflammation. And then the body has to work to get rid of that inflammation. Stress creates inflammation. Poor diet creates inflammation. The other thing I'm doing here is I'm moving my lymphatic fluid around. The lymphatic fluid doesn't have a pump. So the only way it gets to move around is by our movement. This is why simple walking is so beneficial. But I'd rather do a little more. I like to ride a fixed gear bike, and I ride it in the, I ride a 48, 12, 13, or 14 in the rear. So it's almost like the top speed on a speed bike. And what's nice about the fixed gear is that when I'm going downhill, I could either be pedaling to go forward, or I could just let it move my legs. So I'm constantly pumping lymphatic fluid throughout my body. Lymphatic fluid is important because it cleanses the blood. And if the lymphatic fluid is not moving around, the body has to engage other processes to get the blood clean. So now I'm going to do the real exercise here. My objective is to bound to this one. So this is the progression. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that you can do inside, in your bare feet. And look, I'm out of breath. Now granted, I'm 70 years old, so it takes a toll. But I do these 2 or 3 times a week. I do footwork drills. Look how hard I'm breathing. Now, when you start breathing hard, it's a good idea if you can breathe into the lower abdomen and then breathe out. So that is it. And you can see with this one, you'll notice when I started doing the bounding in the higher speed, I stepped back because I can't go that fast yet and get my feet inside. And I was more focused on the bounding. My intention was more about getting to this space than it was. And I put the cone there because I want to be putting my foot in the same place. Otherwise, what happens is it's random. If I'm not putting my foot in the same place, I could make it. Next time I come up short, and I don't have feedback. One of the things that these exercises do is this immediate feedback, and that's where the dopamine and serotonin come in, because the dopamine for habit forming, right? That's the habit structure. And I look at serotonin as the one-up neurotransmitter. And both of these are increased, by the way, with these exercises. So the more serotonin, the more good mood. The more dopamine, the more I can lean into the habits that I want. But the instant feedback, that serotonin is a dip. You take a dip, and that's where the corrective comes in, because it's immediate feedback. Now here's another drill that I'm working on now, and you can do this one at home. And you do not need cones. You can just use red Solo cups. Sometimes when I'm out in the park and I just want to play around, I'll get rocks, because I like to go to different places. That's adding novelty. I add hills, do different things. There's plenty of drills. I go live once or twice a week while I'm out doing footwork drills, and I'm always introducing something different. There is the staple. I use that one every time because it's my warm-up drill, and I've been using this one lately because I'm having trouble with 1-foot drills, and it's also going to help my sprinting. Again, I'm not a runner, I'm not a fitness instructor, I don't have anything to do with fitness other than the 7 fitness areas, which is mental, physical, spiritual, emotional, which is the agency, that's what we control, and then the relationship, professional, financial, which is what we want. But what we want is also involving other people. So we have to have agency over ourselves, and we have to have personal leadership to even decide if what we want is the right thing for us. And once we have that agency and personal leadership, and we do laps, mental, physical, spiritual, emotional, mental, physical, spiritual, emotional, to become the person first that's right for that quest. And then when we go after the quest, relationship, professional, financial, we already have agency over ourselves. We're not going to be triggered. And that's the point of the 7 fitness areas. But what I was saying, I'm not a fitness coach. I'm not demonstrating form. What I'm demonstrating is ways to generate neurotransmitter. And I never ran track. Where I got these drills was by going on YouTube, and I just Googled agility drills, speed drills for sprinting, speed drills for running, speed drills for soccer, agility drills for soccer, and you just find some that you like. And I just go out and experiment, and I mix and match depending on what I want. So this one is, I'm not yet there where I can, at least on grass. I've never tried it on concrete. So concrete will be easier. Nope. Turns out the forgiveness of the grass is probably helpful. You see, I can't do that. So what I did, and here's another example of the progression. So we know the intention. The intention is to put the foot here, and then here, here, and then here, here, and then here, here, and then here. What I did was, for the progression, and to make it easy, but then take away some of the assist. You take it away, take it away, take it away. So what I did was, I put this foot just as a balance, an extra comfort foot. So now, when I hop, if I get off balance, that toe touches the ground. And you'll see why I'm still doing this drill, because I can't do it. I'm not very good at it. This side is a little bit stronger. And to give you an example, 3 weeks ago, I saw this drill. I saw this drill on TV, on YouTube, and I saw this one, and I couldn't do it using a ladder. I was using a ladder, and I couldn't do it. But because of the way the neurotransmitter process works, the activating neural pathways, without even practicing or doing anything, the next time I went out, I was able to do at least one lap or one. And this is, and now I can do it. So the reason I'm doing this drill with the hopping is because eventually I want to be able to go from here and skip a space. And again, progression. So hopefully you're seeing this constant repetition of the novelty and tension, precision and balance and progression, explosiveness, and struggle on the edge of ability. Now, you also notice that I gave myself a little bit of help with my toe. I don't want to make it so hard that I'm getting too much of the serotonin dips. See, when I do it, I get a serotonin boost, right? I said serotonin is like the one-upsman neurotransmitter. So when I do it well, I get a nice little boost, and that helps with the dopamine. It makes me want to do it again. When I do it poorly, we got to get it better. And that's why having the little comfort foot helps. But we don't want to rely on the comfort foot. We want to, so yesterday when I did this drill on grass, I only touched the foot down once. And what I found is that once I get going, the momentum helps me. So then I started saying, well, if I just tap it down once, and then I should be able to get going. So let me try that right now. So the idea is that getting started, inertia, right? You're overcoming inertia. If I get started, It's not that good. Like I said, the grass is more forgiving, but I'm supposed to be getting my foot all the way in between. And then you could change it up. You can make them narrower. You could make the spaces further away. You know, that means I have to hop further. I could make them closer, which makes it a shorter hop, right? It makes it a shorter hop, but it ups the precision. There you go. So I go live in Life Expansion After 50 on the Facebook page. I go live 3 times a week at random times to demonstrate, and that way I can also document my progress. We're talking about how do we optimize performance, and specifically optimizing performance after 50, but the real thing is the shift after 60 and after 70, after 80. We have an age decline line that starts somewhere in the 40s. It starts declining, and from the age 40 it declines down to like 76, whatever the life expectancy is. And by the way, that life expectancy is understated because it treats everybody from age 0. So the calculation is done for all the people who were born in this year. The average longevity is 76. The problem with that is if you're 50, that average longevity no longer applies. You can remove that from the math. And now, what's the life expectancy from 50? It's going to be more like 90 because you're starting again. So if you take all the 50-year-olds today and you look at that life expectancy, I've seen different tables. Some say low 90s, some say high 80s. And then if you look at what will it be when they get there, because if you are 50 today, but then if you do a reset and look at the tables again, or the life expectancy again at 85, they said it's going to be more like 104. This is why this is important, because we can choose to live hoping that we don't fall, or you can do drills like this and you'll probably never fall unless you mean to. You can do stuff on the steps. You just get creative because you're not working on muscle, you're working on neurotransmitter. Now, this doesn't replace going to the gym. It doesn't replace exercise. You still have to do physical exercise. I ride, I lift weights. So I still do that. This is different. This is strengthening the signal. When you are in your 20s and 30s, that neural pathway signal is strong because the body has a lot of neurotransmitter. As we hit 40, 50, 60, you may have noticed if you're older, in 40s you feel like you need more recovery. Well, part of that is the muscles, but part of it is we have a weak signal. And then in 50s we feel like we lose strength and maybe agility. Again, we're losing the signal. If you look at a muscle atrophy chart, and again, it's not my field, but when you read what these people are telling you, I would imagine that if you took a muscle atrophy chart and just looked at muscle atrophy by itself, and if you ever had a cast on your arm, you know what I'm talking about, it looks pretty steep. But if you look at it from the lens of the neurotransmitter and separating the neural pathway activation from the muscle, what you'll see is the muscle atrophy, much, much shallower drop, much less of a decline, but the neurotransmitter drops here. And if you're older, it drops really fast. If you're younger, it drops here. But either way, it comes back quick. And this is days. This is years. So we have the muscle that we had when we were 20, or a percentage of the muscle we had when we were 20, 30, 40. What we don't have is the signal. So this is what I'm doing by activating the signal. I'm getting more neurotransmitter. The more neurotransmitter I have, the stronger my signal can be. And the stronger my signal can be, I can now activate muscles again, and with more weight and being stronger. A quick visual is that you have glutamate, neurotransmitter, transmits the signal from the central nervous system to the neural pathway. The neural pathway is a set of neurons. Now remember, we have 100 billion neurons, so taking a step might involve 1,000 neural pathways. So this is all very opaque to us, but the way it works is you have these neurons, and there's a synapse that connects them. And the more you do drills, the more you exercise. Deep practice. Look up deep practice and it answers a lot of this. When you do that, you wrap each neuron with myelin. What happens when a neuron gets wrapped with myelin is that it fires faster, with more accuracy, more consistently, and with more speed, so or quicker. So I say it's quicker and it's faster, if that makes sense. So the reaction is less, but it's also faster, so that's a double. That's important because if you're 60 or 70, you've no doubt stepped off of a curb and you misjudged it by 2 inches and you kind of stumble. That stumble, and then, or you may have like fallen and you feel like you're falling for a whole 5 seconds as you stumble out of it. That is how I imagine neural pathways firing without good timings. The signal from neuron to synapses to neuron should be within 4 milliseconds, one way or the other, plus or minus 4 milliseconds. That's super fast. That's 4 thousandths of a second. Think about that. So you take a tenth of a second, and then a hundredth of a second, and then a thousandth of a second. So it's got to be within 4 milliseconds for good execution. So athletes, they're firing 0, 0, 0, 0. They're right on point. And then you have normal people who are firing plus or minus 3 or 4. So by generating myelin, what we're doing is we're making the neurons fire faster with more accuracy, and that's going to be your precision and your being able to make a play or a move or whatever. It applies to whether you're playing the piano, the guitar, singing. It's the same neural pathways work all of this stuff, how we speak. And then what happens is the myelin, and you can look that up, M-Y-E-L-I-N. Daniel Coyle wrote a great book, Talent Code. Angela Duckworth in Grit, she gets into it as well, and they talk about deep practice and how you can build myelin, because you want to be able to build myelin. Now, myelin doesn't go away with lack of use. The synapse does. So if you don't use that neural pathway, the synapse drops out because the brain is not going to make excess neurotransmitter. The synapse drops out, but neurons are still there, and they're still wrapped with myelin. This is why when we activate them, so that this explains why that muscle atrophy curve is a lot less than what we might think, because once we start putting synapses back into it, we're there. If you ski or snowboard or any seasonal sport, surfing, and you may notice that first day out, man, you're awkward, you can't keep your balance, you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm not gonna be able to do this, what's going on, I'm frustrated. And the next day, it's coming back. The third day, you're fine. I used to think that was the stabilizer muscles. Now I realize that a large part of it is the neurotransmitters, is the neural pathways are being activated. So hopefully you can see how this is coming together, because when you can see it and you see the lens and you recognize 95% of everything we do is done by habit, and habits live in the neurons and the neural pathways, then you start to realize why habit change best practices are what they are. That's it. Thanks for joining. Follow my Facebook page, Life Expansion After 50. I will go live again on Tuesday in the afternoon, Pacific time. There's it. Thanks for coming. I'll talk to you next time.